Maher decided to weigh in on the issue of critical race theory. And unfortunately, I don't know if this is a rightward shift for him, but he decided to add some legitimacy to this ridiculous argument that school-age children are learning a graduate level curriculum on systemic racism. Now, pay close attention to how he frames this, but it starts off with Chris Cuomo and one of his statements that also caught my attention. So let's watch.
Critical race theory.
Yeah.
And the people on the left will mock the ignorance. They're too stupid to know.
Yes.
Here's the problem. They still get to vote for you. And feel overwhelms facts all the time in elections. That's nothing new. People vote on feel.
And it's not a phantom either.
That's
that There's something going on in the schools that never went on before. Now, I'm not in schools. I have no interaction with children whatsoever. But I do understand this issue because I read accounts from parents, from educators, from people, and this is all over the country. When you say critical race theory, again, this is the binary situation we always find ourselves in this country. If you say that on MSNBC, people think that's a great thing because they're finally teaching an honest history of racism in this country, which I know no one who is against that. I'm certainly not against that. I think, I remember what my education was with American history. We learned about the Civil War. I mean, they mentioned racism. We understood slavery and Lincoln and blah, blah, blah. But they didn't really go into it any more than Gone with the Wind goes into it. It was there, but you didn't feel it viscerally. Now we're doing that, and I think that's a good thing. People should understand that. That's different than teaching that racism is the essence of America.
Cenk, he mentions that, like, his history education growing up, and he's like, we learned about the Civil War, and racism was mentioned. And I was like, did he think that that was good education? To just mention racism in the context of the Civil War, I think is kind of crazy. But nonetheless, later he said that he's in favor of, maybe teaching a little bit more, like maybe emphasizing the issue of race in the context of the Civil War a little more. He seems to be in favor of that. But I don't know. I haven't seen evidence. Maybe I'm just completely out of the loop, and I'm ready and willing to learn if someone can just show me evidence that public schools are teaching children that this country was founded, like the foundation of this country is racism, and that we're all racist, we're all either oppressed or oppressors. Like, I want to see it. And don't say like, oh, I heard that this school is doing this or that. Don't send me a Daily Caller article on it. I want to see the actual curriculum that's being taught in a public school, in grade school. No one's shown me that. I haven't been able to find it.
No, almost everything Bill Maher said there was a lie. And it was right-wing talking points and probably fed to him by his new friends like Ben Shapiro. He's like, I'm seeing it everywhere. Yeah, because you're probably reading right-wing blogs because you've become a right-winger in your old age. So he's like, it's being taught all over the country. Really, Bill? Where? I am seeing it from the parents. Really? Which parents, Bill? You're making it up. And every once in a while when they're challenged on that, they're like, I think there's one example in like Fairbanks, Alaska or something. Oh, really? You found one example out of the entire country? No, I think there might be two out of the entire country. So is that a giant issue? It's not a giant issue. That's a phantom menace. But here is Bill Maher to do a classic, it's actually a Fox News trick. We brought on progressive Bill Maher. No one's more liberal than Bill Maher. And he now says the right wing is right, that everybody should stop talking about racism. It's the Democrats' fault. It's the Democrats' fault for the Republicans being racist. Okay, so look, if we were having a sane conversation and the schools are actually teaching that America's foundation its essence is about racism. Like if you go to Project 1619 and you bring in that conversation, that debate, et cetera, but you're not debating it, you're teaching it as ideology, then we would say, hey, that's an interesting point, and let's talk that through and let's see where the boundaries are, right?
Right.
But that's not what's happening at all. And then, and I got to say at least one more thing about the preposterous things that Maher just said there. He said, I don't know anyone who doesn't want to teach the history of racism. Well, that's because you're incredibly ignorant. all you would have to do is track the news. You're supposed to be in news. I know it's a joke to you, but there was a poll out that came out a couple of weeks ago that very clearly said 4 out of 10 Republicans don't think we should teach the history of racism at all in this country.
Right. Let me go to that
40% of
poll.
Republicans.
Yeah, it's a little bit higher than that. So it's a Monmouth University poll. We want to make sure we bring you the receipts. They found that 43% of survey takers that identified as Republicans said that they are against the teaching of historical racism in public schools, as opposed to only 5% of Democrats who said the same thing. So 43%. And by the way, they differentiated teaching about historical racism with critical race theory. When they asked specifically about critical race theory, the number among Republicans and Democrats was actually much higher. So when it comes to just simple, hey, we're teaching you history and there's racism in the country's history, obviously, are you cool with your kids learning about that in school? 43% of Republicans said no. So you're right, Cenk. I mean, the expert here who looks at a bunch of anecdotal evidence and then comes up with definitive statements and all sorts of assumptions, apparently is completely unaware of a recent poll by Monmouth University.
And the way, so when he frames it that way, here is a theoretical left-winger. That's what everybody in the media says, Bill Maher's left-wing. And he comes out and says, there are no Republicans who don't want to teach the history of racism. When in fact, there's 43% of Republicans say, no, we don't want to teach it at all. And by the way, why are you touchy about teaching racism? I'm not touchy about it because I didn't do it. And by the way, my ancestors did terrible things, but I didn't do it. And I don't mind you teaching the things that they did. Why? Because it's history. It's history. But Republicans do mind. They do take it personally because they are racist. But Bill Maher comes out and whitewashes it. No, it's the Democrats' fault. And I don't know any Republican. They're all angels. Every Republican Bill Maher knows. I mean, they have dinners together. They're on his panel 24/7. He agrees with them 24/7. And he's here to tell you, as a liberal, the right wing is right about everything.
Let's move on to the next clip.
The kids are taught and sometimes separated into groups, oppressor and oppressed. Again, does a kid even know what those words mean? Would they gravitate toward that if you hadn't told them? I mean, you're taking something that was getting better, race relations in America, and I think everyone recognizes, everyone right-thinking in my view, that still a lot of work needs to be done. Remedial efforts need to be taken still. Racism is part of America. But I did a thing one night about progressivophobia, which is a term Steven Pinker coined, which means somehow liberals got afraid to acknowledge progress. You know, it's two thoughts in your head at the same time. You can acknowledge that we have made great progress on all the social issues. And yet there is still more work to be done. We're not saying mission accomplished. It's just saying, let's live in the year we're living in.
There has been progress in some areas, right? Gay couples can get married. Like, you don't want to minimize that. But the reason why race has become such a big topic, it's like it's front and center in a lot of these discussions, is because of police shootings of unarmed Black people. It's because of Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old who gets shot and killed by a cop who shows up and shoots and kills him within 2 seconds. He's playing with a toy gun and the cop shoots and kills him in 2 seconds. Philando Castile, who had a legal gun and let the cop know during a routine traffic stop, hey, I have a licensed gun in my glove compartment, shot and killed in front of his girlfriend and her daughter. I mean, it's those types of cases where people are like, hey, can we maybe look at this and work toward progress in this area? But the dominant discussion among right-wingers in this country has been to minimize that, to pretend like it doesn't exist. They're far more organized. They've got money behind them. They unify behind the message of, no, police violence against Black people doesn't exist. And they win. They win. They win to the point where all of a sudden you have Bill Maher on CNN just completely forgetting the fact that the whole reason why we're talking about race in this country is because we have Black and brown people who get gunned down while they're unarmed. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think Bill Maher is worse than a right-winger because you expect these talking points from a right-winger, but here comes Bill Maher to validate it and pretend, oh, my side is totally wrong. my beloved buddy Ben Shapiro and every friend I have in the right wing and Ann Coulter, they're all right. So everybody remember, we all agree the left is wrong and the right wing is right. So he says absurd lies like they're teaching all across the country that that the kids should be lined up as the oppressed and the oppressor. Show me one example, Bill. Show me all across the country. That's not a thing. You just made it up. You just made it up because you probably read right-wing trash and think it's real. Because all my friends are right-wing, right? There is no such thing. They don't line up kids. If they lined up kids and said, you are the oppressor, I would hate that. I would be 100% opposed to that. That's not what they do. You liar. You liar. Okay? And so, and don't come at me with, well, kind of maybe a little bit when we teach racism, doesn't that say something? And then it's in Fairbanks, Alaska, all over the country, oppressor, and they make the kids separate out in the classroom. That is a bald-faced lie. He's a terrible guy. All right, but it's much worse than that. So he says then, well, it was getting better. It was getting better. And presumably the left wing screwed it up. I mean, these black people complaining about getting killed and murdered and shot by the cops all the time. It was getting better until you started complaining again. Okay, it was getting better, and the Democrats ruined it. The left wing ruined it. You missed Trump coming in and calling every Latino immigrant rapists and criminals. What, did the Democrats do that? No, Trump did that.
No,
when he said there was good people on the Nazi side, Bill, on the Nazi side. And then you're saying, oh, it was getting better until what? Oh, until the left wing did something wrong. Not Trump. I know he's against Trump, but in the context of this conversation, he's not talking about the right wing going massively and brazenly racist. He's making it seem as if the left wing made it racial. That's insane.
Yeah, I mean, look, when the Trump supporters marched in Charlottesville and chanted, "The Jews will not replace us," that's what progress in America looked like. And so I guess Bill Maher thought that wasn't that big of a deal when he, cites the incredible progress we've made. Look, this country has always had racial tension. There's no question about it. There was a point where people were not as overt. They didn't feel as emboldened as they are today. And I guess that's what he's referring to when there were, people thinking terrible things and wanting to do terrible things in the shadows. But to talk about the issue of discrimination, of racism in this country, as if like it's this made up problem that progressives are whining about, I think you're right. I mean, it's just awful. He's not citing any real concrete evidence, and he's furthering the nonsense talking points and manufactured garbage coming from the right wing. And everyone gets to point at him and say, look at him, he's a lefty, he's a liberal, and this is what he says, so it must be true.
Yeah, and he said, no one's saying mission accomplished. Again, you made that up. Almost the entire Republican Party is saying mission accomplished. We shouldn't do anything about police reform. They just voted that way. They didn't get a chance to vote because the Republicans killed the bill. I should be more accurate. But every Republican is against police reform when unarmed black men are being shot all across the country. And so, oh, no, nobody's saying mission accomplished. You're absolutely wrong. And a huge percentage of Republicans say don't ever teach racism. No one's saying it's mission accomplished. No, you're projecting. I believe that Bill Maher thinks that the mission is not accomplished, although barely around the edges. But he's speaking as if the Republicans are pure as the driven snow. I'm on here at CNN to tell you, my God, the poor Republicans, the poor right wing, the Democrats made it racial, and we had it figured out. It was mission accomplished. In another part of the interview, he said, everybody wants to live in diverse neighborhoods now. Where the hell do you get that from? He's just picking one thing after another out of his ass and going, here's a right-wing talking point for no reason. Here, I'll lie about this too. Now, do I believe that Bill Maher wouldn't mind living in a diverse neighborhood? I believe that. I don't think he's a monster. I think he still has some left-wing positions, etc. I'd be surprised if he was racist against anyone but Muslims. I wouldn't want to live next to Muslims. They're violent savages. He's talked about that many times. But okay, I'll grant him that he wants to live in a diverse neighborhood. You think Tucker Carlson wants to live in a diverse neighborhood? You think his audience wants to live in a diverse neighborhood? Tucker Carlson does stories about, well, this town in Pennsylvania used to be all white. Now it's like 40% Latino. Well, you can't blame people for being opposed to that change. And then Bill Maher's like, I don't see it. I don't see it. Mission accomplished. Mission accomplished. It's not Tucker's fault. It's not Tucker's fault. It's your fault for criticizing Tucker. Absurd. And this is what the crap. And then Chris Cuomo afterwards goes, oh my God, are you worried about being canceled? You're so brave. Please. I'm not saying Bill Maher should be fired. I'm saying he should read a book. He should read an article. He should know anything, and he should stop lying on national television.